have a commitment of one kind or another, and those who don't. And that is one marker of the difference between the fact that both Richard and I are vegetarians, the fact that we were both brought up in East Africa, the fact that we both wear glasses, the fact that we both went to Oxford, got nothing to do with anything that explains why we
I think I'm not a vegetarian, I have to confess.
Oh, good. Well, there you are.
I went vegetarian for this evening. And I intend to in the future.
A mark of rationality.
I just have a particular fascination because my background is very strict Christian, way back generations, ministers and lay preachers in the family and all sorts. And I'm kind of the first generation to actually step back and say, hold on, what do you mean?
Congratulations!
I'm worried that you're a genetic aberration.
But it's just the fact that it's very difficult thing to break away from it, and they make that lived personality and all the rest of it. It's fascinating. Thank you.
Something else? Somebody was waiting on that.
I think we might try and take another one from the other room.
Okay.
Hello. You've talked about probability, and my question relates to that. Quantum theory leads some physicists to suggest that there is not one universe, but there are multiple universes where every possibility is played out. If this is the case, or does this theory lead us to a position where one of those universes must contain a God, and could that universe therefore be our own? In other words, does this scientific theory force you to admit at least that there is a possibility of God?
You mean that in some universe there might be a God?
Yes, and that universe could may be ours or may not be, but that in some universe there could be a God.
Well, I have to confess that it always slightly troubled me in Newton, Isaac Newton. Now, you know Newton was a Cambridge man. We all speak here at Oxford, folks, so we know that it's typical of Cambridge people to think that what happens in a desert meadow near Cambridge, that's the apple, there's a rather romantic stories of the apple and the earth attracting one another. But what happens there in Cambridge applies to the entire universe. Because this was Newton's supposition that the law of gravity applies everywhere. Then we were able to resurrect Newton and say to him, oh Isaac, why do you think that what happens near Cambridge applies to the whole universe? He would say, because he does say that pretty there, because the universe is the same everywhere. It's homogeneous throughout its parts. That's his phrase. And if you press him, as sharply trained Oxonians, as to why he thinks that, he would say, because he does say it biblically, the universe is the same everywhere because it was created by God, and God is an economical workman. Those are his words. Two big assumptions, that there is a God, and secondly, that God is an economical workman. And you think to yourself, he's got the whole of eternity, or she. Why just make the universe the same everywhere? Why not have a bit of fun, Why not entertain yourself with different laws of nature and that kind of thing, just to keep yourself occupied? The multiverse theory is the suggestion that if there were such a deity, he is trying to keep himself occupied. But the supposition behind your question is, isn't it the case that if there were perhaps an infinite number of universes, and that all possibilities would be realized in these infinite universes, that in at least one there would be a deity? That's the supposition behind your question. And once again, putting it like that requires all that background legwork to try to make sense of the idea of a deity that might exist in a universe whose laws differ from our own. It's a bit like saying that if there are many universes or an infinite number of them, one universe might contain fairies with little gauzy wings and so on. It's that kind of background that you have to do before the supposition even makes sense.
Yeah. I think that the particularly idea that there might be a God in one universe falls foul of exactly the same objections that we've been talking about anyway. But I am interested in the suggestion that in an infinite universe, with an infinite number of planets, or indeed an infinite number of universes, the argument that there's another planet where this entire scene is being enacted identically and adopted because there's an infinite number of them. And then there's another one which is exactly identical except that Anthony's not a moustache, or at utterly trivial.
I never had trivial stuff.
I've never really thought of it. I can't really get my head around that, because you believe that you can draw a multiply out the combinatorial possibilities to such an enormous extent that you kind of run out of universes, even infinite ones. But obviously I don't fully do justice to the concept of infinity.
But the scary one is where it's exactly the same as this, and we're sitting here, but we're both saying, there is a God, there is a God.
Yeah. I think there are two different kinds of multiverse theory which are very, very different and which are quite confusing. One is the one that says there's a very, very large number of universes with different laws and constants. And that is sometimes invoked as an explanation for why there are some physicists who allege that the laws and constants of the universe in which we live are peculiarly equable to our existence, are peculiarly favourable to our existence, and then we invoke the anthropic principle and say that we have to be in the kind of universe which could give rise to us. And that only works if you postulate a large number of universes with different laws and constants. So that's one kind of multiverse. But the other kind is the one that some quantum theorists use, and that maybe is what the question was referring to. I don't think it is. But some quantum theorists like Hugh Everett and David Deutsch at Oxford use, which is to get around the sort of Schrödinger's cat paradox by saying, well, there are other universes, and in some universes the cat is dead, in some universes the cat is alive, but there's no actual problem in the way that there is with the Copenhagen interpretation, where it's only determined whether the cat's alive or dead when you open the box. So I just want to throw that up as being a possible source of confusion between two different kinds of multiverse.
What did I answer on the left here?
I think whether
How about
there was an mechanism in chapter.
This is more a general point, a specific one related to the existence of God. It might seem a bit simplistic and silly, but it's one that's occasionally troubled.
Can you talk a bit more slowly, please?
Okay. When we were young children, we run up to various Christmases and birthdays, irrespective of whether we got presents or not, we'd already told our parents that there's no need to try and find out what's in the presents, because when it gets to our birthday or Christmas, we'd open them and find out what's in there. And I think this has some sort of parallels with life. I mean, this might seem like it's fairly morbid thought, but the one thing we all have in common in this room is eventually we're all going to die. Whether that happens tomorrow or in 50 years, eventually we're all going to meet our end. Although I find obviously conversations like this very interesting, very useful, it does occur to me what sort of justification you could have of spending so much time in life sort of considering questions that ultimately in death, whether we want to or not, we might find answers to. Just for the record, I'm not actually religious, I don't believe in God, so I was just wondering what you'd say to that.
I didn't really hear much about that, I'm afraid.
It was a question sort of about the meaning of life and the fact that we're all going to die, which, as you said, is true. Then perhaps I might rehearse a little secular sermon that I sometimes give, and I'm sure at least one or two of you have heard this before. I'm very, very fond of pointing out to people that a human lifespan is less than 1,000 months long, if you do the maths. 12 times 70, 12 times 80 years. It's just 1,000 years long. A third of them were asleep. A third of them were in the shower or the loo or Tesco's or something. And it leaves rather a small number of months actually to do something worthwhile. About 300 months of real living. Most of us have used up some of those 300 months already, so a sense of urgency kicks in here. And I'm putting in mind, whenever I say this, and I'll point out to people how few months of human lifetime consisting, and the people get an anxious look on their faces, I tell them of a story I read, or not a story, a report by someone who's talking about her mother who died of cancer about 2 years after being diagnosed with cancer. And this woman said that those 2 years were the happiest of her mother's life because everything trivial, everything essential fell away. Things that really mattered to her, the people she really cared about, came fully into focus. And so that for those 2 years she lived most vividly and richly a human possible life. And that anecdote, I think, and the truth about the brevity of human existence seems to me very powerful, because it makes us focus on the question of the good, of what's worth doing, and what's valuable in that. And it reminds us that we have a duty to ourselves and to others, really to make the best of ourselves. And it immediately leads on to this other thought, that the one great falsehood which has been practiced on the whole of humankind through most of its history is that there is only one right way to live, one great truth that everybody has to believe, one right rule of life to which everyone must subscribe. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Stalin's Soviet Union or the imposition of Torquemada or any religion or any totalizing mindset that tries to groom everybody into the one right answer. But it's false, because there are many right answers and there are people. We've all got different interests and needs and talents. And once we recognize the urgency that there is in our lives, we must answer that responsibility to do the best with the talents that we have. And then we see that there are many, many kinds of good lives, and that we could live the way we were free-minded and energetic about doing so.
I'll remember that.
Hi, I was just having a question about kind of the way we define the laws of physics. Because if you believe in scientific inquiry, you define the laws of physics as what we've proved to be true using science. So if there was some kind of being that could, for example, make matter appear out of nothing or break the laws of physics, surely that just defines the new laws of physics to be what he can do or what they can do. Like, surely that changes the laws of physics. So you can't really have a supernatural being. Surely you kind of defined away the ability to have a supernatural being if you have that kind of scientific mindset.
Did you get that? The acoustic got me. But could I just ask you to repeat what your sort of best point there, obviously?
Well, if we use scientific inquiry to define the laws of physics, if we say that using science to prove things defines what the laws of physics are, surely a being cannot break the laws of physics. Because if we have evidence that they have broken the laws of physics, then those aren't the laws of physics anymore.
Yeah, the laws of physics have changed as a consequence of being broken.
Yeah, well, they never were what we thought they were. We just have to revise what we thought they were.
I think that's maybe another way of saying what we've just been saying.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. If I got you right there, you're saying if we have really powerful, adequate evidence in favour of the laws of physics, yes? If we have such evidence, then anything that putatively, allegedly controverted them, or rather that we wouldn't have grounds for thinking that there could be anything that could upset them or controvert them. Is that your point?
Well, if we had very good evidence for what we believe to be the laws of physics, but then there was some kind of miracle that we had so much evidence for this miracle that we could say, no, that's wrong, the laws of physics have been broken. Some people might say, oh, that means there's a God who can affect the laws of physics and break the laws of physics. But surely you could also say, well, the laws of physics aren't what we thought they were.
Right, we just got the laws of physics wrong, and
Yeah.
we've got to change them, which is what's happened all the time.
Yes, I got you.
But
Yes, I agree.
that in some ways kind of defines, means we can never have a supernatural being. In a way.
Please come to the last question. We're coming through there in a minute. You can try us again on my questions. Come.
So, at the start you said that any evidence would have, the idea of being sort of faked or a fraud is much more likely than God existing. I was going to say, as a sort of a science student, Professor Dawkins is a scientist, if you look at, say, Nature and Cell and so on, and the standards of evidence which they use, for example, if those journals could repeatedly show evidence of, say, irreducible complexity in biological systems, and you yourself could see the evidence and you could convince yourself it was not a fraud, what makes you so convinced that, say, a deist God is so unlikely that the entire fabric of how the scientific method works is somehow wrong in this way? And how would that, hypothetically, if that could be shown, why would you still not believe that evidence if it was so